On tonight's episode of Cryptic Realities, we're stepping into the unknown to explore one of the most bizarre cryptid tales of all time, the Mothman. From the eerie streets of Point Pleasant to mysterious sightings around the world, the Mothman has left behind a trail of terror, and some believe a warning of disaster. Is Mothman a messenger from beyond, or something far more sinister? Please enjoy these chilling tales of eyewitness accounts starring this winged creature, the Mothman in the sky. I never believed in legends. You know the type, the ones your friends joke about around a campfire or whisper about when the wind howls through the trees. But that was before it happened. It all started on a quiet evening in November. I was driving home from a late shift at work, winding along the back roads of West Virginia. The trees were bare, casting long shadows under the pale moonlight. The radio was static, a slight crackle of white noise, and the world felt heavy, like something was about to shift. I had just passed the old bridge, the one that people said had been cursed, the one that gave the town its eerie reputation. My headlights caught something in the distance, just beyond the tree line. At first I thought it was a shadow, maybe an owl or some animal, but then it moved. It wasn't like any bird I had ever seen. The shape was too large, and as it fluttered across the road, I could see it more clearly. It had wide, bat-like wings, stretching way beyond anything normal. Its eyes, those glowing red eyes, stared right at me. Right at me. My heart skipped a beat as the creature hovered for a moment, its wings beating slowly, the sound eerie in the silence of the night. I slammed on the brakes, the car screeching to a halt. The thing was too close now. It was massive, at least 7 feet tall, with long, dark wings that seemed to almost blend into the night. The air felt thick, like a weight pressing on my chest. I froze. The creature let out a low, guttural screech that made my skin crawl. It wasn't a bird sound, not like anything I'd ever heard before. It was wrong. Then, as quickly as it appeared, it spread its wings wide and shot up into the sky, vanishing into the darkness with an unnatural speed. For a moment, I couldn't move. My hands were still gripping the steering wheel, my foot still on the brake, as my mind tried to process what had just happened. Was it a trick of the light? A hallucination? I glanced at the rearview mirror, and that's when I saw it again, its silhouette against the darkened sky, perched on the old bridge behind me. I couldn't tell if it was watching me or waiting for something. I wasn't sticking around to find out. I hit the gas and didn't stop until I was safely back home. That night I locked every window, double-checked the doors, and sat up until the early hours of the morning, too afraid to close my eyes. I never saw the Mothman again, but the feeling never left. Whenever I drive by that bridge now, I can't help but glance over, half expecting to see those red eyes staring back at me from the shadows. Some things are better left unexplained, but you know what they say. Once you've seen the Mothman, it's never really gone. The Mothman and Max. I've always been the type to laugh off spooky stories, ghosts, cryptids, haunted houses, you name it. I'd roll my eyes when people talked about that creature, the Mothman. But that was before I met him. It was a chilly autumn evening, the kind where the air feels crisp and the wind carries the scent of fallen leaves. I was out for a walk with my dog, Max. He's a big, goofy golden retriever, always wagging his tail and sniffing every tree and bush like he's on some important mission. The sun was setting, and the woods near my house were starting to look like something straight out of a Halloween movie. Long shadows, rustling leaves, the works. Max was trotting ahead, sniffing something interesting by the old fence line, when I heard a sound. At first I thought it was just the wind, but it sounded like wings? It wasn't the flap of a bird, more like a slow, heavy beat. My heart skipped a beat. I looked up, but the trees blocked most of my view. Max suddenly stopped sniffing and stood still, his tail stiff. His ears perked up. It was as if he was listening to something I couldn't hear. Max, I called softly, but he didn't move. His eyes were locked on something above us, his body tense. That's when I felt it. The air around us seemed to change. It was thick, heavy, almost suffocating. Then, from behind a thick cluster of trees, it appeared. The creature was enormous, at least 7 feet tall, with dark, bat-like wings that stretched wide. The wings beat slowly, sending a shiver down my spine. Its eyes, they were glowing red, like 2 fiery orbs that seemed to pierce through the fading light. I froze. Max growled, low and deep, his fur bristling. I couldn't move. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't listen. The Mothman just hovered there, watching us, as if deciding whether we were worth its time. Then, just as suddenly as it appeared, the creature shot up into the sky with a terrifying speed, vanishing into the darkening horizon. Max barked, his voice echoing through the woods, as if chasing the thing away. But it was gone. I stood there, heart racing, trying to process what I'd just seen. Max looked up at me, his tail wagging like nothing unusual had happened. If I didn't know better, I'd say he was proud of himself for scaring off whatever that was. I didn't stick around to see if the Mothman was coming back. I grabbed Max's leash and practically ran home, every crack in the woods now feeling like it could be a winged shadow waiting to swoop down. I still don't know what I saw that night. Maybe it was a trick of the light, maybe it was a bird, though it certainly didn't look like one. But Max? He hasn't been the same since. Now, whenever we go for walks, he won't go anywhere near that old fence. He just stares off into the distance, as if expecting the Mothman to return. And honestly, I kind of expect him to, too. The Mothman at the farm. I never expected to find myself back at the old farm, especially under these circumstances. But life has a way of throwing you into strange situations. My mom was dying. The cancer had spread too far, and all I could do was help take care of her until the end. The farm had always been her pride and joy. My dad had passed years ago, and now she was too sick to tend to it herself. So, I found myself back on the creaky front porch, the air thick with the smell of hay and earth. With my mom lying inside in the small bedroom she used to call her sanctuary. The house sat on a sprawling plot of land, surrounded by fields and barns. The horses were still kept in the stable near the barn, even though Mom couldn't ride them anymore. I'd been taking care of them, feeding them, making sure they were brushed and comfortable. But something about the place always gave me the chills at night, even as a kid. The quiet here is different. It's too quiet. That evening, after I tucked my mom in and made sure she was settled, I went out to check on the horses. The air had grown colder, and the wind howled across the fields like something trying to warn me. I grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen, slipped on my boots, and walked toward the barn. The barn doors creaked open with a familiar groan, and the horses neighed softly from inside. I stepped inside, and the sound of hooves on the wooden floor echoed in the stillness. The horses were calm, but something was off. They were acting nervous. They kept shifting their weight from side to side, flicking their ears back and forth like they were listening for something. I paused, looking around with my flashlight, but all I could see were the shadows stretching long across the hay bales and stalls. Then I heard it, a low, rhythmic thump. It sounded like something was beating the air, but from where? I couldn't see anything. The horses were starting to get agitated now, stomping their hooves and snorting. I walked deeper into the barn, my pulse quickening. The thumping sound grew louder, almost like wings flapping, slow and heavy, each beat sending a chill up my spine. I stopped in my tracks. There, in the farthest corner of the barn, standing between 2 hay bales, was a dark shape. At first, I thought it was a shadow cast by the overhead light, but then it moved. It was too big to be a shadow. The wings, huge, leathery, and folded against its body, were unmistakable. The creature had the posture of something waiting, watching. Its eyes glowed red in the beam of my flashlight. I froze. For a moment, neither of us moved. The horses were still restless, clearly terrified, and I could hear my breath coming in shallow gasps. It wasn't until the creature took a slow step forward that I snapped out of it. I stumbled backward, tripping over a bucket, and the Mothman, or whatever it was, lifted its head, its massive wings unfolding like something out of a nightmare. It was as though the entire barn was shuddering with the movement. I was paralyzed with fear, but somehow I managed to tear my eyes away long enough to look at the horses. They were panicking, trying to back away from the creature, but their annoying thing, there was noise, furter. But my I knew I had to get them out, fast. Come on, let's go, I yelled, waving my hands to get their attention. They didn't hesitate. They bolted for the open barn doors, hooves pounding the floor, and I rushed after them. I didn't dare look back. We all made it out of the barn, and I slammed the doors behind us. The horses were breathing heavily, sweat glistening on their coats, but they were safe. I stood there, panting, staring at the barn from the outside. I couldn't see the creature anymore, but I felt its presence. Like it was still watching me, waiting. I didn't go back inside, not that night or any night after. I stayed with the horses in the paddock, too afraid to leave them alone. Mom passed away a few days later, but even though I had to face that painful goodbye, I couldn't shake what had happened in the barn. People say the Mothman is a harbinger of disaster, a sign of something terrible to come. Maybe that's true, but maybe it was there for me in the way I needed, standing guard, waiting until I was ready to let go. I never told anyone about what happened in that barn. I don't think anyone would believe me. But whenever I visit the farm now, I can't help but feel the Mothman's presence, like it's still out there, watching over the place, waiting.